So, it is not church, it is not a classroom, and part of this evening's format requires audience participation because they're going to get some questions and you are going to get some questions. So this will be so much easier if you're sitting up in the front rows because we're going to be coming around with mics and we're videotaping things. So please don't make me come and use my teacher moves to forcefully get you up here. Look at that. I mean it. Move.
Okay, she's looking at me.
Thank you.
Alumni of Leadership Frederick County are the first ones to move up front.
After they were being old.
That was my choice.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And for the record, a few of those folks were also staff, so they were probably a little bit nervous about their paychecks, but thank you. I appreciate that. So this is the first time we have tried this format, and I wanted to kind of let you know how this evolved this evening. I meet on a quarterly basis with business leaders, and we typically have a breakfast, and many times we'll go into a school just to try to keep them aware of some of the things that are happening, issues we're facing in education, but also an opportunity for them to see some of the wonderful opportunities that our students have. And most recently, we were having a conversation about college and career readiness. And we were actually showing these business leaders some of the questions that our students had to answer on the PARCC assessment to give them a sense of some of the kind of thinking that went into that. And we were very pleased to have the president of Hood College join us for that meeting. And so there was a lot of lively discussion around college and career readiness from that college perspective as well as the business perspective, and we ran out of time because the conversation was so rich. So we thought, we need to do this again, but we need to broaden it because there are some other people who need to participate in this conversation, and we also wanted to have a chance to hear from the community. So tonight we're going to focus on 3 key topics. We're going to talk about college and career readiness. We're going to talk about the achievement gap that we face, and we're going to talk a little bit about the role of technology in education today. And so I'm going to introduce the panelists to you, but as I said, some of the questions will be directed at them, some of the questions will be directed at you as audience members. Because we are taping this and we're also doing this live via Google Hangout, if you speak, we're going to have to ask you to accept a mic, and we have folks who will be there with microphones so that people will be able to hear you and not just see you standing there looking like you're talking but not knowing what you're saying, okay? So let me introduce the wonderful panel that we have here this evening. I'll start down here representing Mount St. Mary's College. We have Provost Mount St. Mary's University, I apologize, Provost David Ream. And next to David, we have the president of Eliminating the Achievement Gap, a community partner with Frederick County Public Schools, Mr. Jay Mason. We have Dr. Andrea Chapdelaine, who is the president of Hood College. And sitting next to her is the president of Frederick Community College, Libby Burmaster. Tracy Hilliard is the principal of Centerville Elementary School, which has more students in it than 2 of our high schools in Frederick County. And every middle school. Obviously, Tracy feels that pain every day. Next to her is our current Frederick County Teacher of the Year, who was also a finalist for Maryland State Teacher of the Year. And she makes us very proud every day, Amanda Portner. And last but not least is Mr. Rick Weldon, who is representing the Chamber of Commerce tonight in his role there as Vice President, but who also did a great job of getting the folks from Leadership Frederick County out to support us this evening. So we thank all of the Leadership Frederick County current participants and alum who are here tonight. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that in the audience, we are honored to have our county executive, Mrs. Jan Gardner. Jan, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And thanks to everyone else who has come out to support this conversation. So we gave them a little bit of a head start because we sent them some of the questions in advance. So I'm going to start with our panel and ask you to think about that term college and career readiness. And we'll start with the question we asked Leadership Frederick County 2 weeks ago on Education Day. In your mind, are they the same thing? And if yes, tell us why, and if no, tell us why. Andrea, you're holding the mic. Do you want to start?
Yes, I'm starting. Well, thank you all for coming. It's a great opportunity for us all to come together and think about how we can best serve our students here in Frederick County. I would say that they are, to a great extent, the same thing. We want our students, when they come out of high school, to be ready for the next step. And to me, whether that's college or the first job that they take, there's a lot of skills that overlap. I often think of what we call the soft skills, which I always find ironic because I think they're some of the hardest to teach. But the communication skills, the problem-solving skills, the analytical skills, ability to work in teams, those will serve our students whether they're moving right into a college or they are moving into their first job. So I do view them as the most important and important for both of those steps.
And I'm going to agree with my colleague. I think that part of the opportunity we have is to move away from an education system that at its root was really a tract system, which had a vocational route and a college prep route, and to really look at our education system as preparing students, as Andrea said, for the next step. And another part of that next step is ensuring that they are individuals who will be able to work and to continue studying with the global and cultural competencies that they're going to need for the 21st century. The other reason that I think when you look at it from the transitions, major transitions in the education system, moving into the 6th grade, the 9th grade, the transition to post-secondary education, what is so important is that there is a proficiency in especially reading and math that is definitely going to be needed. And that's something that I think in the past in our educational systems, perhaps it was a tract system and the expectations and the standards weren't the same. And I believe they should be for being college and career ready.
I would conclude as well that you can look at the college and career readiness standards and see that we're trying to prepare our students for that next level, although our students may be college eligible. But then I think we have to think, are our students really ready for that next step? Because eligible means you're eligible to go, you got the GPA, but what about that deep understanding to make sure that they can take the next step? And I think that's where we have to look and to look at that career and college readiness. And does it just mean that they're going to go and get that 4-year post-secondary education, and would they be able to come out and then be ready for that career that they're going to take on? And I think the other piece of that goes to when we think of college and career, is it just our students leaving after that just have a job that could be marginal within their community, even though that can be successful as well. But I think we have to make sure that our students are ready, they are prepared, and we're doing that within our school system.
Well, we have to make sure that when our students do leave high school, that they are ready for that independence. And I think we run into a lot of our students that are not ready. Go off to college, and a lot of our students are back home after that first semester, maybe that second semester. So we have to make sure that all of our students are ready. And I do find out that we have a lot of students that aren't ready for that independence that they get when they go off to college. It's going to differ when they go into a job because they're going to be working with other people. They're going to have a mentor possibly, or a coworker that's the same age or a couple years difference. So they're going to have somebody that's going to help them along the way as they're working. But when you go off to college, you have a lot of independence. And when you get that independence, you're not studying like you should. You're probably going to the wrong places, not like the library or something like that. So I think we have to make sure that when our students are leaving high school, that they are very, very well prepared to have that independence.
So a week ago,
We referred to Leadership Frederick County when we got started. If you don't know, it's a 9-month experiential learning program. We take 40 to 50 high-performing community leaders in our community and expose them to the people and the processes that make up this thing we call Frederick County. So a week ago, we had Education Day for the current class. And the superintendent would be a terrible poker player because her face just totally gives it away. So she stood up in front of the class and asked this question, the question she just posed to the panel. And would you be surprised to know that almost everyone in that group answered no when asked if college and career ready were the same thing? Now, through the discussion, I think what we untangled was the answers were essentially the same as the answers that our educational leaders have given. The perception of the class was it wasn't there now. It needed to be there in terms of parity between being career and college ready. And I'll just tell you on behalf of the 930, I think it is today, members of the Chamber of Commerce, you'd be surprised to know that 65% of those members employ fewer than 10 people and typically do it with a workforce that isn't educated at the post-secondary level. 65% of the members of our Chamber of Commerce. Now we think about AstraZeneca and Leidos and the hospital and Fort Detrick and these science and research-based companies, but the majority of our members are retail and hospitality and food service and landscaping, electrical contractors, plumbers, drywall, carpentry contractors. So certainly from the perspective of the organization that represents our businesses in this community, college and career ready are the same thing, should be the same thing, and should be the focus of our effort.
Anyone else on the panel want to add? Anyone in our community seats want to add to that?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
For our college representatives, do you see a difference between our true international students and their college and career preparedness and our American students? And if so, what should we do to change that?
I'll go first, David, and then Libby, if you want to.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think that you see much more diversity within any country in terms of preparation. I mean, the variety, the extent to which a particular student is prepared and ready for college, I think you would see more variety between any given group of students within a country than you would across. So I think there's diversity no matter where you look in terms of readiness. I think that, and then of course it differs by what international student, what country are they representing, because the school systems around the world are very diverse. I will say this though, I think that the biggest difference we see at Hood, given where we recruit a lot of our students from the Eastern Asian countries, is they are better prepared for standardized testing in a way and are better prepared for a much more, I guess I would say, prescriptive style of education. I don't know that that's a good thing. It may result in better grades and better scores sometimes, and we see that and we know that as we look at differences across the world. But the reason that we have such diversity in our education systems, even at the college level, is because I think we are recognizing there's a whole variety of skills we want our students to have. So I think that's the best I can answer, but there's so much variety and diversity across school systems, not only within our country, but across the world, that it's hard to say there's a clear difference. We definitely see those differences on some standardized testing, but I don't know that that's an indicator of one being better than the other. It's just different approaches.
And the typical students who come to our institutions seek us out and we're seeking them out. So typically there's a good match. So the ability to make a broad generalization is a little tougher in that regard.
So one of the things we asked the panelists to consider was, has that idea about college and career ready evolved in the last 5 years? And how have you seen that changed? And then from there, thinking about, and will it evolve even further in the next 5 years? David, did you want
I'll dive
to
into
start?
that one. I think the recession from 2008 has had ongoing and dramatic influence, not just on our economy in this country, on the way we think about American society, but certainly on higher education. There are demographic challenges in terms of enrolling students, given that the number of students going to college between now and the mid-2020s is going to be fairly level. But there are real concerns that families and students bring to college that I think are significantly more than they were 10 years ago, regarding the ability to leverage a college education into an excellent, well-paying job. And I think a lot of it comes from the concerns stemming from the recession. And that mindset has, I think, strengthened in the last few years. So that, even the government, in terms of looking at the supposed quality of colleges and universities, one way they're doing so is by trying to determine the average income of the graduates from that school. Just because you make a lot, does that mean you've gotten a better education? Now, that's really tricky. But certainly the pressure is there, and it's reflected in everything from the government to families to the way we present ourselves. So yes, I think it has gotten tougher.
I think it has gotten a lot tougher too. I teach in a rural middle school, and I think exactly what you said. Many of my students and their families worry that college is becoming cost prohibitive. They're looking ahead and thinking, I really want my child and the next generation of my family to be able to access a college education, but I'm not sure financially that we can do it. So even in 7th grade, we're having conversations about how your grades here lend themselves to your grades and your performance in high school, which lends itself to scholarships and opportunities based on your performance even when you're 12. So I think we're having those conversations much sooner than I've seen before in my career teaching in both middle and high schools. We had those 20 years ago, but I think we're having them a little more intensely now at the middle school level too, because they've got to start looking towards their future the minute they get to 7th grade.
And I think reflecting back on in about March 2010, when President Obama, put the blueprint out to say, let's reauthorize the Elementary, Secondary, and Education Act, that we needed to look at the college and career readiness standards, that we wanted our students to be prepared. But I think 5 years ago, basically about 6 years ago, when President Obama looked at that, to think now from 2010 to 2015-16, that we still have to look forward, because we're looking at economics, and I think that means a difference. Yes, in the education world, we want to educate our students, but it's that economic piece that we're missing, because we outsource so many things because our students aren't college and career ready. So I think at that point, we need to make sure that our students are college and career ready, not just eligible, but are they ready? And I think that takes to the point where we're looking at the economics. Are our students prepared to take on those jobs that sometimes, if we think about today, in the next 5 years, jobs that we haven't even thought of today, or our students are going to be ready for that. So I think we do have to look forward, and I think our shifts in thinking has to change, and certainly it's going to be different in 5 years. So I think the shifts are going to be huge for the next 5 years to look at college and career readiness standards.
The level of sophistication in the programming at CTC in Frederick County is amazing. If parents out there aren't as familiar with, so if we talk in 5-year increments, what's happened at CTC in the last couple of years, and looking where our students are with CAD, where they're learning cutting edge technologies that are of immediate and high interest in the private sector. I think as long as we continue to focus on and evolve those programs, we're certainly making a huge accommodation toward career readiness by increasing the level of sophistication of the programming. The nursing, career prep programs, I talked about CAD. I think we'll see that same thing as technology continues to leap ahead. But if we can stay flexible and commit to those programs and maintaining a high level of proficiency in technology through CTC, I certainly think we're making huge strides in that area.
For me, I think the shift in perspective started way before just 5 years ago. And And I think back to when we were coming up on the year 2000, and everybody was talking about, all the, the next millennium, what is that going to be? And there was this conversation about the information age. And that's when, as an educator, I really started to hear the conversations around how do we make sure that our students are prepared to function in this new society, this information society. And then by about 2005, people were like, wow, things are changing so fast, the information age is over already, and we're into the digital age. So whatever label you want to put on it, as an educator, that's when I think I started to feel the pressure of college and career ready starting to blend. And also that notion of this next generation of students not being in a career for 30 years, like many of us sitting up here have been, but that whole notion of, being able to change, being able to adapt, being fluent with technology, having these sophisticated skills in order to do the kinds of jobs that are there now that, as Rick said, when you walk into our auto mechanics program at CTC, you are going to see students on tablets interfacing with technology and dealing with car systems that, I learned how to change the oil, check the oil, do basic things when I was learning to drive. I just, no way. I wouldn't even lift up the hood of my car and try anymore. So that was, I think, part of what caused a shift for us, at least in K-12. How about in the audience? Have you thought about college and career ready? Have you experienced changes?
I'd like to know, can you hear me? Okay. You mentioned, Dr. Alban, that you have quarterly meetings with business groups. How frequently are you meeting with parents? And I don't hear the conversation asking parents what they want for their children. When our kids enter kindergarten, the jobs that are around today aren't going to be around in 12 years. So when you're trying to stick them in the little mold of the career for you is this is what we're going to teach you toward, by the time they graduate, that's gone. They've learned a skill set that's not to their advantage. And I'm not a fan of the Common Core standards. I think that's training, not educating. And I want to know how you're going to get around the education portion of what's going on in our classrooms. You're all talking about the utilitarian value of our children. So I'd like to know how many people in this audience are parents of FCPS students? How many of you, if you're an FCPS staff, don't raise your hand. If you're just an FCPS parent, raise your hand. Okay, so the majority of people here are staff. So as a parent, I feel talked to, invited to have representation on your panel. I'm severely disappointed by that. And that you do have the teacher of the year up there, but the teachers as a body weren't participate or asked to participate in this discussion. So I'm severely disappointed that parents aren't a part of the discussion. We're the part of the lecture where you'll talk to us about what you think we should be doing in education. I'd like to see it go more toward, why don't you ask parents what we want for our children, instead of you guys, just like the Common Core adoption, saying, we're adopting this, you're going to deal with them, and your kids are going to go through school learning this. No one asked us what we wanted to teach our children, what their futures were going to be. So I'd like to see that part of the conversation as opposed to what you all believe we want for our children, instead of asking us what do we want for our children.
Well, I appreciate your feedback, Mrs. Rose. And to answer your first question, I meet with the business community on a quarterly basis, and the PTA has me do chats with parents on a quarterly basis as well. And so this evening's program was designed as a forum around these three specific topics. And one of the questions that will be coming up, we'll be talking about experiences of our students in our high schools. So we will be listening to some of that, but part of what you want to discuss is typically what happens when we do the superintendent's chat that is sponsored by the PTA. So, and I know you've attended those, and I'll encourage you to continue to come, because that's where we have more of that conversation.
So you're getting 2 parents per event. So we're not feeling like we belong. We're not feeling included in the conversation.
Thank you, Mrs. Rose. And once again, I appreciate your feedback. I really want to try to keep this forum on track for what folks came here tonight to do. So thank you.
I just want to, as a parent of FCPS students.
We need to give you a mic so people can hear you.
I just want to say, I'm not I don't completely agree with you. I'm not a complete fan of all the standardized testing, but I do want to acknowledge that some of it is mandated by law. There are certain things that you cannot get around that are just, federal or state law. So I just wanted to add that to the mix. And I feel that you guys do try to do as much as you can to include parents in the conversation. And that's kind of like different groups like what Donna has. And that's how I found out about this thing. So I just want to say that.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on how the idea of college and career ready has changed from a student?
Yes. Well, I'm part of a group that's even less numerous than the parents here, which is the students, whose opinions seem to be even more important. And I appreciate the outreach of Dr. Albin to the Frederick County Association of Student Councils to talk with students about these issues. So my view on college and career readiness, there seems to be an anxiety among a lot of students about, getting into college or finding careers, in the global labor market today, with emerging economies in India and China and Southeast Asia. It's growing even more competitive and harder for students to get into colleges and find jobs. And it seems that in America in general and in our school system, in addition, in particular, that there seems to be a gap between the pace of technology improvement and the rate at which students learn to use these new technologies. And programs like CTC, programs like our pre-engineering courses, like our computer science courses, are a good step in the right direction. But for us and for our jobs in the future, things like computer literacy will be even as important as reading literacy. To students, it seems like more needs to be done in this area to improve our aptitude with computers, with this kind of technology that we'll have to use in our jobs in the 21st century.
That is a perfect segue to one of the questions that we had, talking about high school experiences, specifically that we think serve our students well, or things that we think we need to add to ensure they are more college and career ready. Any thoughts from our panel on that one?
I guess I'll jump in and say, I think that one of the, kind of circling back to some comments that were made, is that as much as we can do to encourage our students to explore opportunities outside of the classroom is really important. And one of the things that I, as a parent of a student here in the county, will say is I've been so impressed by the range of opportunities that the students are given to pursue extracurricular activities. Because going back to the independence factor and how we prepare students for all of the skills they need, those opportunities are really critical to preparing them well to be self-motivating, responsible, confident in their abilities to take on those leadership steps, to engage in outreach and interaction in order to network and do all of those, again, soft skills that I mentioned earlier. So I think anything we can do to, and I know when budgets get tight, those are the things that get squeezed, but anything we can do to sustain and support those kinds of activities, I think are really critical. Tied to that very closely is, of course, also everything we can do to continue to support our guidance counselors, who are often overwhelmed by cases in the number of students they're trying to serve. It is so important as students make decisions about those next steps that they are guided well to find the right fit for the college or the right career that they're looking in, because we need to allow them to have that time to explore and find their passion before they make long-term commitments, financial and otherwise, to a particular career path.
When Dr. Albin talked about it really a critical turning point being in the year 2000, and when you think about it, because I agree, I was in the K-12 system at that time, and it was with the dawn of the 21st century, I think that our education system, especially the PK through 12, was looking toward what were being called 21st century knowledge and skills. And it was more competency-based with computer literacy, financial literacy, cultural competency, global literacy. That was really the framework for what education in the 21st century in PK-12 was going to be, with with a beginning in the early childhood years, with the understanding that that was the foundation of all future learning. What also came with the 21st century around that time, Terry and I have talked at a great length about all this, is that that education was going to be different because there was this realization that it was all about each individual learning how they learn. Because, as you pointed out, the idea that you were going to step by step go get a job, be in that job your whole career, that was all being turned on its head 15 years ago. And so the thought was, it's about learning how you learn. What are the different learning styles? We all learn differently. How can we create an education system that provides that empowerment of learning for that will be lifelong? So then very soon came also the idea of career pathways. And that's kind of where this convergence of the same standards and expectations must be there in an education system, no matter what pathway the career or the work pathway may be for any individual, because jobs will be changing so much and you will be having to constantly relearn. There's the famous quote about the most important thing is to learn how to relearn. And so all this was coming together at the same time. The other thing that was happening at the same time that that's what American public education was moving toward was that there was the whole perceived crisis in public education. And so in 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act was passed. And so you had then school districts having to balance sort of what seemed like very contrary missions. And that was your point about the standardized testing and things. And so I think that what is the great opportunity that I see in Frederick County now, I'm a graduate of the Frederick County public school system. I graduated in 1972 from Governor Thomas Johnson High School. And I went off to Madison, Wisconsin, stayed for 42 years, got all my degrees there, and I was tremendously prepared through the teachers and the school system of Frederick County. I will forever be grateful for the education I received in Frederick County schools. And when coming back now, 42 years later, as the president of this community college, I couldn't be prouder either to see the incredible relationship that the public schools, Frederick County Public Schools has with their community college. There is, when you look at other counties in the state of Maryland, there isn't the kind of relationship that's been built, and it began many years ago, and it is now blossoming into, again, another good transition called dual enrollment, where there's early college in the high schools. These are the kinds of things that you're getting at, I think, with as we're looking forward. How can we take our education system and ensure that it's really focusing on what is the knowledge, what is the skills? How are we empowering learning in every individual? How are we supporting through our counseling, through all the support services, through helping parents to support their own children in that very basic thing, learning how to learn, and understanding that for the rest of their lives, it's about continuous learning and asking the right questions. And that's what I think is really at the base, don't you folks, of why this whole convergence, that it isn't a tracking system of you're going to work and, you know, the utilitarian purpose. It's a much higher understanding that it's about how people learn. And the society in the 21st century that is going to survive and prosper is where there's a society that values learning. and values education. And I think that that's really what we're talking about when we talk about college and career readiness.
Any other thoughts from community members, panelists about high school experiences that are doing just that or where we need to grow? We'll start here and then we'll come over here. Or
I just wanted to say,
you need a mic.
As a mother of 3 graduates from Frederick County Public Schools and all 3 college graduates from different schools in Maryland, I think the school system did an extremely good job with my children, but I always felt like it really was my job first. So I wanted my children from the minute they were born to go to college, and whether I had the money or didn't have the money, I planned that from day one, as well as I expected to walk into my teacher's class to know that they planned what they were doing that day. So I have a hard time hearing parents that are, I don't know, I don't like being disgruntled. I'd like being the person that's fixing the problem. But the children are our children. And then I feel very grateful that one of my children is a school teacher and I see how she deals with her kids. They might as well be her kids. And then I have another child who has 2 children that haven't hit the school system yet. I'm glad I'm not her because of what they've got coming ahead of them. So I really am a big advocate of it should have started with the parents, and they should be the partners with the teachers and the universities and everything like that. So
thank you.
that's just my
And we have a comment from back here.
Yes, I have a question. You're talking about college and career readiness. And a lot of it, I hate to say it, is more like for an NT child or what they call a neurotypical child. I'm curious how you're going to do college and career readiness for children who fall on special needs or on the spectrum. Because, now we have a rate of 1 in 45 being diagnosed with autism, and their learning styles, how you approach their learning, how you approach everything about them is completely different. I mean, I'm a mom of a son and a stepdaughter who are on the spectrum, and then I have a neurotypical child. So all 3, you approach them differently to get the same results. And I'm curious, how do you, foresee that going in for career readiness and college?
Well, I think in terms of the pre-K to 12 system, we have a lot of different opportunities, and I'm struggling to think, and I'm looking around and I don't see anyone from Middletown High School here, but we had a very articulate young man who was on the autism spectrum who is getting a full ride to, I can't remember the name of the college, but all the way through his doctoral program because of the incredible academic performance he had in high school. And he applied for this scholarship and received it. He came and was recognized at our board meeting. And if anybody can remember his name, please share it with me because I'm totally blank. But one of the things, interestingly, that he also talked about was the extracurricular activities and how that helped him find a peer group, grow as an individual. If you go to the opposite end of the spectrum, we have a program that we call the Success Program for students with cognitive limitations. And we have wonderful, wonderful partnerships with the business community who provide these kids with real life work experiences. And that can range in so many different ways. So they are finding out about themselves. They're learning about what it takes to be successful in a workplace. One young gentleman whose biggest difficulty was attendance, the day I went to meet with them and talk about their experience, talked about when he started working, that came home to him for the first time, that when you have to go to a job, they expect you to show up. And his attendance had improved markedly. So we do try to offer opportunities and experiences across the whole range. I will tell you, though, that that's an area where I feel if you talk to our teachers, they will say, give us more training, help us understand more, help us figure out more ways to support. And that's one of our challenges going ahead, is making sure that we've trained teachers that way. I don't know if anybody from, Amanda, you want to chime in? Awesome.
I'm itching to chime in. As the teacher on the panel, I'm going to make it sound so small, but it's not small. It's an issue of heart, and that our teachers need to make relationships with all our kids, not just our special needs students or our students who have special accommodations, is that we have to know who they are and what they need. And I think when we know who they are and what they need, then we can kind of figure out how to get them where they need to go. And it might not be grade level that year. It might not be grade level in 2 years, but you might have some sort of mission as to know where this child's going to go over a course of time. And so I think it's about building relationships with your students and building relationships with your colleagues and building relationships with parents, because they're the ones that know their kid the best and can help you figure out how this child needs to write this piece in response to this reading. So I think it comes down to that human core of knowing who your kids are so you can figure out what they need. Sorry to make it sound too basic, but that's just the teacher's heart.
I'd just like to echo that at the college, certainly at the Mount, but my guess is generally, colleges and universities are being so much more attentive to these issues now. Our learning services area, we've hired more people. We had transfer day yesterday. Of the 16 students that came in, 8 of them are working with learning services. It's more and more common. We are ready. Our faculty are ready. We make the adjustments. We work with the students because ultimately it's the students that matter.
The student you were referring to is Jake Evans.
Thank you very much.
And we do have a question from the audience right here.
I just wanted to touch on what the high school student, I guess, you said, yeah. And about high school students being so stressed and all the anxiety about getting into colleges. And I think that is a big change that we've seen in the past 5 years, because it is so predominant. I mean, every kid I talk to is stressed or anxious about getting into college. We have kids cutting themselves, doing drugs, eating disorders. And I think that we have to be careful. Certainly it's important to talk about college and career readiness, but I kind of disagree with kids in 6th grade picking their career. I have a 9th grader. She came home today. They're picking schedules for next year. And she said, we had these teachers come in and they tell us to take AP classes, and we should really take AP classes for college. And she's like, and I don't know what I have kids next to me, they know what they want to do. I don't know what I want to do. I said, you don't have to know in 9th grade. So I kind of feel, having 2 kids come out of high school, that they're pushed very early. And I think it adds to the stress and anxiety. If they don't know what they want to do in 9th grade, yikes. If they don't know if they want to go to college, yikes. If they're not taking AP in 10th grade, yikes. And I just think that we have to be careful. Like you say, we can take college classes in high school. We can take high school classes in middle school. How much further do we push these kids? And so I'd love to hear your comments on that. And my other comment is, I've talked to Dr. Albin about this before, and I just don't see anything happening about it. But as far as college and career readiness, I have one thing that I wanted my kids to come out of high school, out of SPS, being able to do, and it was write. And both of my high schoolers had to take remedial English here. Right here, 66% of students in Maryland, hopefully you all know this, have to take remedial courses in community college. I just think that's terrible. I think it's absurd. I think what can we do about that? I want my kid to write. Technology is great. College is great. Being able to take college classes in high school is great. I want my kids to come out and write. Be able to write.
Two questions there. The first question, how do we deal with the stress that a lot of our high school students are feeling about getting into college? So let's take that one first.
I couldn't agree with you more. I see the stress even at the college level. There's tremendous pressure put on this generation, and I worry about that all the time because I see it, as I go around campus. Okay, I got in, but can I do it? It follows them. I think nationally, 2/3 of college students change their major at least once while they're in college. So that's the first thing I try to tell parents and prospective students as I talk to them is you need to relax. You do not for sure know what you will want to do. And even if you are sure, you'll probably change your mind again. And that's okay because you will have many careers. We know that. So I think as much as we and, parents, teachers, all of us as a community can do to reassure the students that the most important thing they can do is enjoy their college, high school careers, that if they're enjoying themselves, they'll do well. and they'll find a great career path for themselves. But I know it's hard because there's so much media pressure and that stress. And I think it's the stress we as a nation feel, a sense that we are failing as a nation, that is unfortunately we're seeing in our students as well. So I couldn't agree more, and I'm sure my panelists would agree that, you know, we've had to increase so much the support services that we provide to students, and that's critical. We absolutely do that. We invest heavily in that area so that the students are getting the support they need when they're experiencing those high levels of stress.
Any other panelists want to talk about that? Tiana, you want to?
There's a young lady with the mic there. She's ready for
Sarah.
a question.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm the other half of the student representation, and I know Carter and I are very adamant about putting our students' best interests forward, but in the different changing times, as we see an influx of the job situations going around, we all know that FCPS does have required classes that students need to graduate to be an FCPS graduate. Do you guys see that we would have any changing classes as part of those job requirement, graduation requirements? I know a lot of students have come to me and said, oh, I don't understand why we're taking all these different classes. We should be focusing our energy into a field that we'd be more interested in rather than taking these guideline classes. How do you guys feel about that?
That's pretty sneaky, Sarah, because I thought you were going to answer a question, but instead you posed another one.
Sorry, you should have invited me up there then.
But it's interesting because Leadership Frederick County had several articles that they had to read in preparation for their education day. And a couple of those articles talked about a liberal arts college, and a lot of times parents saying, oh, well, you know, get a degree where you're going to get a job. And it turns out that a lot of the training you get through a liberal arts college gets to what Mrs. Burmaster was talking about with that learning how to learn, learning how to think, how to solve problems, how to communicate effectively. And so one of the things that we would not want to get so specialized in high school, because it's that gaining that broad perspective, it's trying things out to figure out what you like and what you don't like, which will continue into college, but probably will also continue into a career. My daughter is 26. She's working with her third employer already, okay, because she knew what made her happy in a job and what did not make her happy, and she wasn't going to hang around in a place where she was unhappy. So I think that's a very different millennial experience, and I'm not really sure what their generation is going to be called. But I think that's part of what we want, and that's why a lot of times you'll hear from the community when we are facing budget cuts, don't cut the arts. You know, that's where creativity happens. That's where a lot of kids find their identity, and it gives them an incentive to learn some of the other things. So does that help?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Carter, you want to chime in as our other student up here today?
Sure. I think part of what Sarah is getting at is that students want a little bit of autonomy in kind of determining the course of their education. You know, Ms. Burmaster talked about learning how to learn. Well, it's a lot of times hard for students to do that when they go through, you know, a curriculum that's mandated all their lives. Their teacher gives them information that they need to memorize, and that's kind of it. So I think students want a little bit more flexibility in determining, you know, what kind of courses they're going to take, and they want to branch out, like you mentioned, into different fields, whether that be the arts, whether that be computer science or technology. So they want some opportunity to explore different areas. And I think there are opportunities to do this out there, even beyond, you know, our existing brick and mortar schools. Like this past summer, took a couple courses online through Coursera and edX, which are online platforms where universities offer courses. I took a class on public policy from UVA, took a class on model thinking from Michigan, and a class on corporate finance from Penn, which was awesome. It was an awesome opportunity to explore different fields, to learn about, you know, subjects that I was never taught in schools. And I think a lot of students would benefit from these courses, from broadening their educational horizons. So especially with high school students, I think it'd be very valuable if there were some way to incorporate these classes into high school curriculums, to give students the opportunity to explore these kind of courses during school time or in their free time and receive credit for them. So.
Folks who were here with Leadership Frederick County, I mean, this kid is saying what we were talking about in terms of rethinking high school. I was fussing about Carnegie units, which are those required credits you have to take, and how that takes up so much of your seat time in high school, and just trying to think beyond that. So you're like a walking advertisement for my Leadership Frederick County speech. I'm going to bring you in next year when they invite me back.
Dr. Allen, we have time for one more quick question from our audience, and then I have one question from online, and then we'll move forward.
But we didn't answer the writing question.
Oh, okay, you're right.
And we hear that so often from our business community. And so I don't know if our folks from higher ed want to talk about skills you're seeing, but I know, did you want to say something, Tracy, about writing with your, oh, Amanda's going to go writing. Go ahead, Amanda, go write.
This is my brainchild because I taught the writing project out of Towson University for 9 years. And I agree with you. I think this is going to address two questions. How has our curriculum changed in the last 5 years? And how are we producing kids that are able to communicate via writing? We're seeing that shift happen right now. Just this year, we're looking at scores from students who have now had all these years of the Common Core and how their writing has changed. It's changed. And as someone who's been in Frederick County for 20 years, I'm seeing that the focus is now shifted towards a more 50-50 approach, 50% writing and 50% reading. In my tenure here in Frederick County, it was not so equal. I would say maybe we saw things at a 70% reading, 30% writing over the last 18 to 20 years, and things are changing. I don't think we've had enough time to see our work pay off yet. I think it's coming, and we're talking about writing, and we're talking about organization and structure, but we're also talking about development of ideas, and that the kids are thinking how does this idea support what I want to communicate, and how does it not support what I want to communicate? And I see that our kids are getting stronger, but right now there's a friction because they haven't had to be independent writers. And now we're asking them to be independent writers, and it's hard. Writing is hard, even for adults. If I have to see one more apostrophe that signals something plural, I'm going to lose my mind.
Thank you.
I want to take the whiteout with me and white out people's vans when that apostrophe is on their business van. But I think if given time, I think we'll see that our students will be able to communicate in writing better, but we're just putting those instructional pieces solidly in place in the last 5 years. So I think it's coming. We just have to wait a little bit for our kids to catch up with what we're teaching. I know.
I'm not sure technology's helping either. When I watch my kids and grandkids communicate with 140 characters or less when they text, this idea of the creative expression is narrowed down to emojis and a couple characters that can somehow represent the idea of an exchange of a thought between two people. You know, I get that that's where technology is going. I'm not sure that benefits us as a society to encourage the creative exploration and expression when we can say all we need to say with a pizza triangle and a smiley face, right?
But the audience really isn't going to be able to hear you without a mic, so.
And I guess a mom that was.
Quickly wanted to say, because I didn't get to add, but it's also frustrating to me, and I've talked to people on the Board of Education. I brought this up umpteen times, I have at the chats, and I don't see anything being done except for, I was told, and I appreciate it, it's changing, but my kids got left in the cold, basically.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to hear that it is changing. Did you have more to add to that?
Yes, I did.
Because I think Ms. Hilliard wants to respond.
The point about the courses is that it's unfortunate we don't have a writing course offered in high school. We have 14, I believe, writing classes. We have about 70 or 80 sports classes. If you look in the course offering, we have 14 English classes, no writing classes, no technical writing classes, no business, no creative writing, no help with writing. I think that's a shame. What can we do about it? How do we change that? How do we make it better?
I think speaking from the elementary side is, she spoke about the middle school and high school. We do have our writing process, which is new for us, Lucy Calkins, our writing program that we're using within our elementary schools. And I can say over the last 3 to 4 years, I have seen a difference in the way our students are communicating with the written expression when they're not just they're not just writing to express themselves, but writing during comprehension, having our students to be able to solve problems and actually take through that transdisciplinary approach where our students are writing throughout the curriculum, not just during writing time. It's taking it through, so our students are becoming those worldwide global writers. Within, we're seeing our kindergartners that were first doing this about 3 years ago, and now third graders. And my third grade teachers, during our data talks, we talk about during our writing time, wow, look at the writing mechanics of our students, that they're doing well. I'm sorry it didn't help the students that are there. Hey, I have a 10th grader, and guess what? It didn't help him either because he's not in elementary, but there's things that we have to do at home too to help him. But I think the other part is that Frederick County is moving, and we're trying always to hear our parents and hearing what our students need to be successful. And I think in the elementary level, we are moving that way. So the dividends will start to pay off in middle school and certainly going to pay off in high school. I'm sorry it won't happen tomorrow, but we're still going to make those trends and we're still going to move forward, but they're there. And I think if you talk to many other elementary parents, that you'll see that their students' writing is better. They're able to express themselves, and they're not writing, I like the dog. They're able to expound beyond that. And we're very happy, and we're going to continue to work with our Lucy Calkins. And that's just not our only program we're using with writing, but that is the one that we are, as a county we're using, but we have other measures, and we take it through all of our curricular areas. So it is heavily integrated throughout our day and not just writing in one part of our curriculum. So I hope that helps.
I'd just like to echo a couple of comments that have been made. I mean, I asked our education department, what's Frederick County doing well? And that was the first answer, that there's a real emphasis on writing from kindergarten through 12th grade, and that it's integrated across the curriculum. From a collegiate perspective, what I need to say is we need students arriving at college who can do a better job of making an argument, stating a thesis, writing coherent paragraphs, and formulating a solid paper. It's not there enough. And perhaps to answer the question that you posed earlier, it might be good to have a variety of courses, but those courses have to involve writing. They must involve written communication, because we know that's what the businesses want. And if you as students are going to really be prepared for the workforce, you've got to have those writing skills down solidly. And honestly, there's been a little bit more burden in recent years placed on colleges and universities to do some of that work. That's why we're so happy about what's happening here in Frederick County now. That work is absolutely essential for us to remain a literate democracy moving forward.
So I know this is awesome, and the same thing's going to happen that brought us here tonight. We're going to run out of time. So I do want to kind of slide us over to another really critical question, because as we talk about college and career readiness, and we talk about expectations changing and the needs for being prepared for jobs of the future, we have to recognize and acknowledge that for many, many years in education, we have looked at an achievement gap that has not changed. And that gap has existed for African American students, Hispanic students, students who live in poverty, students who have special needs. And so one of the questions, and I told you that the panel was going to go first, so audience, we're looking to you for first thoughts on this question, and that is, why do you think year after year after year, these gaps continue to persist?
I think it goes back to what Amanda, is that correct? What Amanda said. It's the relationship building. And I also think it has to do with what you were talking about, cultural competency, and not just cultural competency in terms of what I look like, but on a much deeper level. understand where I'm coming from, understand that I come to school with more than just my book or my pencil and I'm ready to learn. You don't know what the child has dealt with at home. They may not have the parental support. And like I think someone said, it does begin at home, absolutely. But sometimes parents are so bogged down with their own issues, poverty being one that's very glaring in my mind, that they don't have the time, the energy, or whatever. It's not that they care. I think every parent cares about their child, but we have to come into, we can't always look at everything through our own experiences, through our own lenses, understand and open our minds to what might be going on in someone else's life. And there can't be any learning until, just what you said, you see me. If you can't see me, then you can't talk to me. You're not hearing me. I'm not hearing you. We might as well be speaking. And I don't trust you. Absolutely. So it has to start right there. And like you said, it is something that is very basic. Very basic. And I think sometimes we're trying to make it a big deal when it really isn't. Good morning. What's going on with you today? Is everything okay? Did you eat breakfast? Acknowledge my presence. It is very, very simple.
I think a lot of it has to start with the teacher. It really does. When you think about eliminating the achievement gap, the teacher needs to be knowledgeable of the content. And I'm an elementary school teacher, so I have multiple contents to do with my third graders, but you also have to have that relationship, and my students have to trust me. I also have to do the testing that's required, and I have to do all of these things, and I keep hearing awesome ideas of how to make our education system better and how to make our students better. But it really boils down to two things. Time, which, writing wants this much time. Reading wants this much time. And I feel like I went through the school system, the pendulum swings. I was taught whole word, and then they switched to phonics. I'm a horrible speller. I've gotten better now that I had to teach it when I taught kindergarten. But unfortunately, times change. Writing wasn't a huge emphasis, and now it is. So hopefully those students coming up. But as we're taking away time from writing, will it affect how they're reading? So time is a huge thing. It's time for the teacher. I have 40 minutes a day if I'm not answering phone calls, returning phone calls to parents, because I want to make that communication to plan writing across curriculums, but also a block of Lucy Calkins writing, which they are very lengthy. I had my math, I have my reading groups, which I have 4 normal reading groups, but my lowest reading group, there are 4 children and they're all getting a different book. So I'm planning for 8 reading groups, because you have to think about that child and that are on different levels. And I have multiple things to do. So as much as I would love to, I was at school this evening until I rushed here. I'm at school every night late. So, but not all teachers have the ability to do that. I don't have children yet, so I'm fortunate enough to be able to do this and provide for all of my students in my classroom. But when I start my own family, I won't have as much time. The second thing is money. I feel like all of these problems would go away if we just had the money. We'd be able to have more technology. We'd be able to pay more teachers. We would be able to give the home support and the food. And there are so many answers and everyone has their own podium. Everyone thinks something's more important than the next. So it's hard to balance it out. And as the pendulum swings, you want to make sure that everyone is getting a fair opportunity. As going through Frederick County Public Schools, I went to Brunswick. When I graduated, I was pushed to be a teacher because there's a shortage of teachers. And in 5 years, you're going to be guaranteed a job. Now, I wanted to be a teacher from kindergarten on. However, not all students know. I listen to these 2 students and I see a little bit of myself, but you guys are on it and you know what you want to do. We have to remember that just like in my 3rd grade classroom where I have students that already know what they want to be, I also have students that are really struggling. So I love to hear that you got, and I'll read you in the newspaper, I'm sure, and you're going to do great things, but we have to remember those students. So as much as you want all of the extra curriculum or extra harder content, that's awesome that you're going online. And I think online's open up those
avenues, but we have students that really do just need to learn how to learn. They need to learn how to communicate, like in businesses. My husband is a web designer, and I love him, but he can't communicate. So, you know, those sort of basic skills, because we have to remember you're going to have high school students that need a lot of support, and then you're going to have high school students who are going to do awesome things. But then I went to Frederick Community College, money-wise, and I loved their program there. And as I worked with there, I was the student government president, and I worked with FCPS because I felt like when I was at Brunswick, graduating in 2005, lots of people told me to go to four-year colleges. Here's Towson, here's Maryland, here's Hood, here's Mount St. Mary's. No one ever brought up community college, and I feel like that is totally changed. And it needs to be a good option because it was a great option. I was able to still work a full-time job and go to community college and then go away to Towson and get my teaching degree. And I'm graduating in May from Mount St. Mary's. So I think although I knew what I wanted to be, this whole track, there are so many students that don't know what they're going to be. So making sure that those students are supported after they leave, you know, middle school and high school, even throughout college, making sure that differentiating is happening in college is good. I want to.
Other thoughts from the audience about the achievement gap?
Everybody talks about the achievement gap coming together when No Child Left Behind was passed. What people don't talk about before No Child Left Behind is that the gap closed at a faster rate. It's slowed down because we now have the testing culture. And this woman back here had a legitimate question about stressing out our children, and everybody nodded in consensus and agreement that it was that way, but no one offered up an answer as to why are our children stressed? It's because of the testing culture. What we need to have in the early foundational years of elementary school, in my opinion, is more hands-on, more play in education, less testing in education. I think that would help close that gap. Let's treat our children, let's let them play, let's let them learn through play like we used to do in the 70s when you got a fabulous education, because we had our hands in the mud and our hands in the bricks, and we were building and we were creating and we were dreaming and we were doing things, and our confidence was built and we built relationships with our teachers. We don't do that anymore. I have grandchildren in the school system. I have little children in the school system. I have lots of people in the school system, and they're all stressed out because they all think that the only thing they're there for is testing. They're driven to the test. They taught to the test. That's why they're all stressed out. We don't need 20 more psychologists. We need to let children be children and let them play through learning, and I think that will help immensely with the achievement gap.
Jason, did you want to talk about the achievement gap?
So just quickly, having had some experience in this area, I truly believe that the achievement gap is really about resources. So that's resources internal to the student themselves, that's resources of the school, it's resources of time, as you talked about. It's also resources of the parent, and I think we haven't figured out how to really address this. And that, I think, is where, you know, school systems lean on community partners. I mean, it's great that the education institutions have come together, but in my experience, you know, parents, sometimes you got to go home and talk to those parents and help them understand kind of how to support their child through the educational process, and that parent might not be available till 8:30 at night. I think it's unreasonable to ask teachers in the education institution to be available from 6:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And I don't think it's a lack of willpower. I don't think it's a lack of effort. I personally have never met a parent, no matter how many resources they were lacking, who didn't want their kid to do well in school. In fact, that was always the first word out of their mouth, is before they even wanted to eat, they wanted their kid to do well in school because they see that as the opportunity to go forward. And it really does come back to, and I don't know that honestly, there's no easy answer, but our typical response is to try to find the next big curriculum leap or the big education leap. And I really see it as a crisis of resource. And maybe we just need to shift our focus a little bit.
Can I piggyback real quick on what Scott's talking about? But I'm going to need you to sit down because I'm going to think I might end up putting the county executive a little bit on the spot to help me here. So here's something that I've struggled with. Here's something that I've struggled with for a long time, dating back to when the county executive and I and County Commissioner David Gray, who's also here, served together on the Board of County Commissioners, and that is, I understand how we communicate community values. And unfortunately, we typically only do that through elections. And I think I've concluded that elections aren't the most effective way to determine what are shared community values, right? Because I think Scott said something that was really important and pertinent, which is when we can coalesce around shared community values, when we can embrace the values that we collectively as a community think are important, there's likely no limit to what we could accomplish locally, countywide, regionally, nationally. But if it's elections that is the process through which we all sort of coalesce around values, I think that's the wrong instrument. So I'm struggling here because I think this is great, right? So it's 50 people, and we're talking about things that are really important to us, but how do we make that conversation go farther? Where we talk about, I don't know, is it through the budget process that's so mundane that I'm not sure you inspire people to coalesce around those shared values. But I think from the small government conservative like me to a progressive like David on this issue, how do we sort of coalesce around what we think are, because I'd love to see a Cindy Rose who has some real clear and clearly stated positions, and somebody who's on the other end of the spectrum talk about, so we agree that we don't want there to be an achievement gap for our minority students. We can agree on that. So then we can talk about what's the process that determines what those resources are that are needed, whether they're community resources or school-based resources. Because I can tell you from experience, asking a teacher to be the one to solve that problem every day with 28 kids, we're not getting there. And we're probably not going to get there. So I don't know. I know it's something that you've thought about, and I've heard you talk about it through the political process, but I think it's different than that. I think the thing I'm talking about.
The best way we can get rid of the achievement gap is having our students, and it goes back to what you said, Ms. Burmester, about valuing education. Our Black students do not value education. We have to get to them to make sure they understand that an education is valuable to their future. If they don't have it, their future is not going to be bright. They're not going to do anything with their life that's going to be positive. They're going to end up in jail. They're going to end up dead. We really need to make sure that the Black community comes out and shows our kids that we are role models. We're positive role models. We are doing the right things, and so should you. We don't want you out here on the street. It's not going to end up well. We have to make sure that our kids are talking to each other about what good can be done instead of, do you want to skip school, or do you want to mess around in class, or do you want to go hang out on the street? Those are the wrong values. Those are the wrong things our kids are learning. They're not learning from the right people. They're learning from their peers, and their peers do not want them to succeed. We don't see a variety of our Black kids taking AP classes or honors classes. They don't want to. They'd rather sit in merit where they don't have to work hard. That's not going to teach them anything. That's going to teach them how to coast by. And when you coast, you don't grow. You don't achieve. I've talked to a lot of students over my 4 years being in EAG. Last month, I had the opportunity to interview 8 students, 2 in honors and AP, 2 in our Civil Air Patrol, and 3 in our merit classes. And 3 students in the merit classes wanted to stay there. Why do you think they want to stay there? Because that's where their friends are. That's what their friends are doing. They're not in the honors classes because it doesn't look good to be in the honors classes or the AP classes. So we really need to make sure that our minority students understand the value of an education before it's too late. Because if they don't, then it will be too late. And we have a hard time bringing them back. They can be brought back. We're not going to lose faith in them. But it's harder to bring them back if they don't learn at a young age that the education is valuable.
Mr. Mason, I'm going to disagree just a moment about the first statement that you made about Black students really don't care about education or I think it all starts with mindset. If you've heard of Carol Dweck, or if you've heard of Mary Kay Rickey, when we talk about building those critical relationships, and that means everything. So as you spoke about earlier about poverty, so sometimes the education isn't on the front table because I'm worried about paying the light bill. So that's why we need our teachers having that mindset and building those relationships to say, what can we do for those students? Not just speaking for, students that come from the wealthier homes, if you want to say, my son, African-American son, is an honor student in Frederick County, and so is my daughter. But is that because their mother's educated? Could be, but I can tell you the relationships at the schools where my children attend make the difference. That when my students are struggling, they're there to help pull them out. My son has had some struggles, but his teachers have been there to pull him out. So it wasn't just the parents understanding or even my son understanding. It was a matter of those relationships from his counselors, his teachers, pushing him and saying, you can do this. You can get through this, and many others as well. So I think we have to think about when we put that out there, that's not going to help our problem. That's not going to help to close the achievement gap. It may help to widen it a little because then we're going to cause a little bit of friction within the community. And not only African-American students are not achieving in Frederick County, our Hispanic students, special needs students, and our farm students, as we call them, lower income. So we have to think about what are those contributing factors to them as well, and what do we need to do to help all of our students that are not achieving, and not to put a label or put a situation on one group of people to say that they're not achieving. Because if more were here tonight, I'm sure that it would be like, wow, because it was a wow to me, that I think we have to really think about what are we doing as a society? What are we doing as a group? What are we doing as instructors? What are we doing as leaders within our school system to bring our students? Are we giving them the opportunity to make that jump? Are we pushing them? If they want to stay in merit, why? Let's push them. We're going to sign you up for this class. Let's see how it goes. So I think not only that piece of it, but we as the educators and people within Frederick County Public Schools need to push all of our students, not just African American, but all of them, to give everybody that opportunity to take that honors, that honors track or that AP track, to be there so they can be successful as well. And I don't think it has to be centered upon one group, but everybody needs that opportunity.
I don't think it is, but my experience over the last year has been dealing with African-American students. And I've heard from their mouths that they're not getting the respect from their teachers. And these are AP students. This was an AP student that told me that. This was some merit students that told me that. So we do have to recognize the fact that these students don't feel welcome in their schools.
Right, and again, I think it goes back to mindset. What are we going to do to change that mindset? And I think if we come back with the positive, that's only going to help and rule out that negative, because the light can't live. The dark can't live if the light is there. So I think we have to give it back and say, what can we do as teachers? What can we do as administrators? What can we do as counselors to give our children those opportunities? And any of our students that are not performing in our, that have the gaps, because it's not just going to close our African-American gap. We just can't close that and say, then Frederick County is the best school system, which it is already. But we need to make sure that we can say that it's the best school system for all of our students, not just one population of our students.
If the answer were easy, we would not have been looking at these gaps for as long as we have, and it goes back decades, this issue. If I do not give Tiana a chance to share one of the questions that has come in from folks who are joining us via Google Hangout, she's going to be incredibly distressed. So Tiana, I promised you were next.
All righty then. It's so great to hear the passionate pleas of our community, as well as the perceptive feedback that we're getting from our administrators. So this is an awesome event. I do have a question from online, and it kind of dovetails on the conversation that was happening most recently. What efforts does FCPS currently employ to be sure that the best teachers are at the underperforming schools to ensure that these students get the education that they need?
Aaron Doolittle just gave me a look that was priceless in terms of trying to answer that question. And Aaron, another one of our Frederick County Teachers of the Year, teaches at Hillcrest Elementary. And how many years have you been there?
13.
13. And how many of the people on staff with you have been there for 5 or less years?
Quite a few.
So about half of the staff? About half of the staff. One of the challenges that we find is when you work in a school, and Hillcrest Elementary School has about 90% of the students who are on free and reduced meals, and about 55% of the students do not speak English as their first language. So it is a school with many, many needs. And when we talk about the importance of relationships, when we talk about trying to understand where your students come from, when you walk into a school like Hillcrest, you better be on your best game every day. You have to be on your best game every day. And it becomes physically and emotionally exhausting. Fair to say? Because you are doing so many things for those children. Erin is a phenomenal teacher, and she does incredible things for those children. She's the anomaly, having been there for 13 years. The other thing, so for some teachers, it's just physically, I can't keep doing this. Or, Casey, I think when you talked about, I don't have a family yet, if you're giving so much of yourself at school every day, you're taking away from your family, or when you choose to have a family. So we do see turnover there. But the other thing that happens at Hillcrest, because as I said, top of your game every day, the training, what those folks learn, they become instructional leaders. And so when there's an opportunity to move and get a promotion or to become that reading or literacy specialist somewhere else, many times Erin's school loses people first, because what they have gained and what they know is so valuable in other places. So there are so many levels of why that happens. We don't have a simple answer. We have tried several things. We try when we get new candidates to send them to interview there first, so that they fall in love with the people at that school and they say yes there before they go to some of the other schools. But then people like Tracy don't like us doing that either, because she wants the best for her kids at Centerville as well. So one of the things that is coming out in the new reauthorization of ESEA are going to be equity plans. And how do we ensure that we have a better distribution? And I think in Frederick County, we're more fortunate than a lot of systems in that, for our Title I schools, we don't have all brand new non-tenured teachers. In a lot of school systems across this country, that's what happens. That's where people start. They last for a year or two and they're gone. So all of us across the country are being asked to come up with locally, what are your plans for creating more equity there? And that's a challenge we're going to be working on in the next year or so.
We have two people that have really been holding on. Can you hear me? Holding their questions. We have the gentleman over there with the green mic who's been waiting, and we have, I don't remember which one of you had your hand up, but one of you here had their hand up. And in the effort of time, if we can keep our questions pretty brief,
We have
our
about
responses.
5 more minutes.
This is great conversation.
Okay. I'm in the private sector, and I came to present an idea. I'm an executive recruiter, and I've owned my own company for about 17 years. And what I see, I came from one of those neighborhoods, inner city, single parent. We didn't, our neighborhood, we didn't think we were going to go anywhere. So what I'm proposing is, let's have a partnership, and I'm proposing in my neighborhood, in my community, to get private sector, government, voluntary, which with my church, and I've already have my pastor that I've talked to. We want to create a community center in an area that we targeted, that we know if we look at what's the grade point average of this whole community, we know where the struggles are. We'd like to have a community center there with a partnership of these three. And if we can get that to start, I believe over time with, I want to invest in it. Through the church, I certainly volunteer and do things, coaching things, but if we can get some private sector people to do this, and I work with some of the biggest companies in the country. And if I look at what do they have, there's a portion of, they have community outreach that I'm looking for the right forum, the right project that to get all these three involved so that we can lift up some of these communities like you're talking about achievement gap. I came from that community. I want to lift those communities up.
So make sure I have your contact information before you leave tonight. Because you're right, it takes all of us, absolutely. Thank you. And over here?
My name is Mr. Brown, and this is my daughter, Sydney. First of all, I want to say, if you're an educator, my hat goes off to you. You have our children more in the week than we do. However, I do say it should be a partnership. And when it comes to testing and our children saying they're stressing about testing, one of the greatest things I heard when I was being tested, the tester said, everyone put your pencils down, turn your pages down. And she said, listen, you either know it or you don't. If you're having a challenge with something, okay, you mark by it, you keep moving. Now, what we tell our daughter when it comes to education, yes, it will make that she can have it better in life and or easier in life, because when you're educated, well, the statistics say that you tend to make more. So that's an incentive for her. And if I point my finger at the educator, I'm pointing three back at myself, and it has to be a partnership. And I tell my daughter, when you go to school, you go to learn. But I don't always hear that from parents because they like, hey, go to school. And then they go back and sleep, or, you know, it's like they don't care. But my wife has done the exceptional because she always stays on top of it. When she get an email about something going awry with my daughter's grade, as soon as she come in, oh, we're going to discuss it. And this is what you're going to do. And we say it out of love because we want her to have it better. And this is across the board. I coach track and field, but when I talk to other children, black, white, other, I say, how are your grades? And I won't let them say, okay, I'm good at track and field, knowing that, okay, if they get a scholarship for athletics, they break their leg or something, it's done. Now they don't have that education that they need. So it takes that. It has to be a partnership. We encourage our daughter from when she leaves home, when she go to school, you talk to the teacher like you want to be talked to, and you listen and respect that teacher because that teacher is your elder. She has the education. Now you have to get it. And I also say, treat people like you want to be treated. And I lastly tell her, if you think you are being treated unfair by an adult, where you can listen, do what you have to do, but when you come home, tell daddy, tell mommy. And we will go before the school boards to fight for our children to have that equality. So let's have a partnership. It is never about just the teacher. It is about the parents too. And when your child leaves and go to school, they should know it's not just to hang out with your friends, it's go to learn, because those friends that you have, when every one of my children have graduated because we pushed them to go to school, like we push them to do everything else and they want to do everything else, at the end of the day, we push. We push as parents so that our kids can have it. And so it's a partnership. Thank you for everything you're doing. My wife does an exceptional job.
I just want some books because I'm more of a hands-on type person. So my achievement gap comes with I'm trying to teach her something, or she comes and says, Mom, I need help. And I'm looking at her like, well, I don't have a clue what you're doing. So let me get online and email your teacher because we're going to have to discuss this, because I gave her an answer to something, went back to school the next day, and the teacher told me it was wrong. So I emailed the teacher and I said, look, I was late for work because I did this problem probably 20 times, and I still came up with the same answer. The teacher emailed me back by the end of the day. She said, you know, I apologize. You were right. But it was the way that I was taught to do the math, and I was doing it the long way, and she didn't know that way. But the teacher told me, keep doing what you do, because your answer was correct and I apologize. So my achievement gap, it may be on a smaller scale, but it's because I have a relationship with all of her teachers. I thank God for that. My son graduated from Tuscarora in 2008, and I had a relationship with his teachers. The one thing that I do regret though, he said something about AP classes and honors. My daughter is in honors classes, and I know a lot of Black American, African American kids that are in honors classes. And I know my daughter wants to be there. And I know that one of her teachers recommended for her not to be in a class. And I said, no, I'm checking this box because I want her in there. And I know that she can do. Now, the problem that I have, and it was because I think it was a matter of trying to be like everybody else. And I regret making my son take an AP class. And I say that because he was not ready for it. So he took an AP class, and I felt it was so the school actually got credit for it, but my son didn't. And so because of his GPA, so I would rather him to make A's and B's in honors classes than to be making a C and D in an AP class because I knew he was not ready for it. So it's not all of our classes. I just left from Frederick High School looking at that gang analysis, Mr. Rob Marker. And all of the kids over there, if you all could have been there, I'm like from one extreme, sitting in here and leaving from over there has my mind all over the place. You're talking about Hillcrest, where you have MS-13 sitting right next door to you. So, I mean, we really have to partner with each other to get some of this stuff to stop, because what I just heard from over there, it scared me and I almost didn't make it here. I had to leave in the middle of the session. So if we do not work together, the kids are not really scared. They just don't know, and they just don't trust people. So they go to wherever they can to try to get that pride, that acceptance from somebody. So it's not that they don't want to do, they don't really have a lot of people encouraging them to do.
So we call this event Community with the emphasis on unity. And we didn't even get to the third topic, folks, because these are challenges that we as a community face in terms of supporting our students pre-K through 20 so that they can be involved, positive citizens in our community, giving back to our community and building the quality of life that we want. I feel incredibly proud to be able to be part of the Frederick County Public School System because I see teachers create miracles every single day. And I think the fact that we have our county executive taking her time to be here tonight to hear this conversation and by being here, showing her support for it. We have business representatives, we have teachers, administrators, higher ed. We have a community organization that has dedicated itself to eliminating the achievement gap for 12 years represented. But we also have Leadership Frederick County, community leaders sitting here, parents, students, thank you so much. Together, everyone walked into this room because you care. And it will only be when all of us work together. There are a lot of layers to this onion, and if the answers were easy, somebody would have found them long before now. But I am very encouraged by the fact that we have a room full of people who said this is important enough that I want to engage in this dialogue, that I want to volunteer to create a center, to create a partnership, to work on tackling these issues. You kind of tossed out the gauntlet there. So Jan, I want to end by giving you an opportunity. If there's anything you want to say or next steps you want to propose, because you've got an eager group here ready to work with you in moving our whole county forward in these areas.
Well, thank you for having this event tonight. It was very informative. And I do think that kids succeed when they have expectations from their parents and expectations from their children and expectations from their teachers and expectations from their community. And so I do think it takes the whole community to meet the needs of our young people, and they're all different. And so that's why I think there's not a singular answer. We know that children who come to school stressed because they're hungry, their parents are getting divorced, maybe somebody's lost a job, they're going to need some extra support and extra attention. And that has to come from a teacher who maybe has 30 kids in their class or from somebody else in the community to step in for that. So I think sometimes that expectation can come from a lot of different places, but I think expectation is a good part of the solution. And so as a county executive, I want to help build that partnership to make sure that our schools have the resources they need, that parents have the resources they need, and that we work together to make sure that our kids can be successful in the future. And I think there's lots of different pieces to that puzzle that have to come together. So I grew up in a household with a mother who was a teacher. She's still a teacher. She'll always be a teacher. And, I saw her do a lot of extra things for kids in the community. She knew who needed what in her school, and she would intervene and step out and do some things that whatever she saw a kid needed and needed to be done, she would try to provide. And so I really think you have to almost get to that level. And as a community, we need to value our teachers. I get very frustrated when I hear people say, they should be grateful for their job. They don't need to get paid. I think they have one of the most important jobs in our community, and we really need to value our teachers. So that's how I would sum that up, and we'll just keep the conversation going.
So I have a suggestion.
We need a mic. This battery's dead.
Yeah, I don't need a mic.
No, we don't.
It's the biggest joke I've ever heard that I need a mic. So I have a suggestion. On behalf of Carly and Courtney and Ellen and Scott and Aaron and the other 900 alumni of Leadership Frederick County for the last 28 years, I think the public sector, the private sector, banking, business, the spectrum, nonprofits, I think we represent a workforce that can help you establish what those shared community values are. So I'll pledge on behalf of the 900 alumni of Leadership Frederick County over the last 20 years that Scott and I and the team will work to help you coalesce our community around some shared values that I think would facilitate further dialogue. Because again, this talent pool that's represented by the 5 or 6 people that are here, it's literally transformative, the power of these people. There's no reason to not start this conversation when we have a workforce of up to 900 community leaders who can dedicate the time to help you do that. So on behalf of the folks that are here and the other 900 alumni, I think we ought to get to work.
And you identified the first value. We want to eliminate the achievement gap. That's universal.
It's a good place to
So
start.
thank you. Awesome. What a way to end. Thank you. Thank you so much.